Hi, it's Paul Davies here again from Startup Sales Coach, and here is practical influencing skills for startups.
Before we kick off, if you enjoy this presentation today and you'd like to go a little deeper, here are two books that you should check out. They're both written by Robert Cialdini. The first book, Influence, was released in 1984 and it's become a bestseller. It continues to sell and it's got some core principles that we'll be covering today. The second book, Pre-Suasion, was released in 2016. It's also fascinating. He takes it even further in terms of the science and the research into influencing people and sales. So yeah, these both books are great and good companions to read if you want to go deeper.
We're now going to cover the 6 principles of influence that Cialdini wrote in his first book, Influence. The first one is reciprocation, then consistency, social proof, liking, authority, and scarcity.
Reciprocation. Reciprocation means we feel obliged to return favors given to us. A couple of examples. So when you go to a store and there's food presented to you, often you'll be given free samples. This isn't given just because they're being generous, but because they know that there's scientific research showing that people are more likely to purchase when you've given them something and they'll want to reciprocate. Recent research by Cialdini talked about how in a candy store, if you gave candy to all guests or people entering the store, it would increase the rate of purchases by 42%. The next story is a personal one. So one of my neighbors is really passionate about multi-level marketing. And one day he called me up and said, "Paul, what's your birthday?" And I wanted to find out why. So he told me that on my birthday he wanted to give me a gift. And for me, just the alarm bells rang. And sure enough, the time came when I received this wonderful gift in the mail. And I felt, as you probably know, I felt concerned that if I accepted the gift, I'd feel obliged to reciprocate that gift by coming to his meetings. And at the time, those meetings didn't have a lot of interest to me, so I didn't want to accept that great generous gift. So I politely returned the gift to him, and just because I knew of the power of reciprocation, even when you know about it, you still feel obliged to reciprocate. So yeah, it's quite effective in influencing. Here are 3 examples of where reciprocation can help startups grow their business. The first example you can see quite a lot in SaaS companies, where they might offer a free trial. It could be a 30-day trial or even a freemium subscription, so you have unlimited constrained access to your product. What these startups are trying to do is create value to enough potential customers so that some will come back through reciprocation and want to pay for a full license. The second option is when you're trying to target a large organization and a senior executive of that organization. These people and these organizations are hard to get into, primarily because everybody's trying to get into them. So by writing a white paper or some thought leadership that addresses problems faced by that organization, you should be able to get a meeting with a senior executive. If you target that white paper really well, the chances of success will be great. So the better written white paper that helps them, in return, hopefully you'll get a meeting introduction with that senior executive and the opportunity to build a relationship with that organization. The third example is targeted towards startups that have professional services as part of their offering. So professional services being developers, project managers, and others that when they have spare capacity, such as when they're on the bench, you can offer their time for free to potential customers. This might be reflected in offering a half-day workshop to these potential customers, and or even doing some scoping exercises for them. That helps build a relationship, and also in some ways I think builds that reciprocation power, so that in some way they'll try to repay you for that generosity you've given them.
The next example is consistency, which means we have a desire to be consistent with our behavior, and that can be a very influential thing for us in our decisions in the future. Some examples: customers and suppliers. As a customer, we are often inclined to stay with the same supplier, whether that's a financial planner, our stockbroker or lawyer, even if we're not 100% satisfied with that level of service. Now, there's always people that will switch, but there is evidence to show that we like to be with the same supplier, even if, we're not happy. And that is something that continues on today. The other examples are with our voting and our sporting teams. We also generally like to be consistent each year. We don't change our teams, and it takes a lot of effort and a lot of issues to usually change our voting preferences. Now, here are some good examples of where you can use consistency as a way to influence your prospects in your startup. The first one is to, when you're dealing with decision makers or senior management, appeal to aspects of their behavior that you want to encourage more. Now, this could be their management style, the way they've managed in the past, their approach to good governance, their impartiality, or their generosity. So if you can draw out examples of behavior in the past that they have demonstrated, and then as a way to use that to influence them to act in your direction, that can have a very influential effect. The other example, if you're a SaaS provider, or any startup really, is to get customers started on small payments. The easy thing is that once you're in their system for a big organization, then that's half the battle won. But the other is that if they're making regular payments, even small payments, that is a good way to influence them to make bigger purchases in the future. The other thing is, particularly when you're pitching to big enterprises, is to quote their mission statement in your presentation. I've done this and seen this occur a lot, and it's a very good way to get customers aligned, particularly if your message aligns with their mission statement or quotes given by their senior executives that are made in the public in terms of what they want to achieve. And lastly, and it's a tool that I've used in the past, and it's great, is when you're doing large deals, this could be a solution sale, work collaboratively with your customer. Don't just take all the questions down and then work separately with a proposal and then deliver it to them. But keep it open, keep the whole proposal in an open, constructive way, and welcome feedback and direction from various stakeholders as you develop that proposal. The beauty about that is that when you finally present that to the CEO or managing director, you can then call out the collaboration and indicate that evidence that you've already collaborated before, and also that it silences any critics in that meeting, because they've all had a chance to give feedback and you've listened to that feedback, and it's all included in that presentation. So it's a great way to get that support and again, show consistency, and as a way to win that deal. I love each of these examples and highly recommend it if they suit your own startup situation. The next form of influence is called social proof. And basically that means we look to others similar to us to help us make decisions. Here are a few examples. Now, think about the last time you went to a restaurant. Did you look for a restaurant that was empty and had nobody in it, or a restaurant that was full of customers already enjoying their meals? The answer for most of us would be that we're looking for proof that other people have chosen something, and that is a good indicator that that choice is good. Whether it is or not, it makes no difference, but that's a form of that we look for. Another example is the online ratings and reviews, whether that's Amazon, eBay, or anything that's digital we see. We look for similar purchases that we can be influenced by. And lastly, a personal example for me, when I was studying at university many years ago, I worked at a petrol station or gas station, and I just serving people paying for their fuel. And next to the station had a repair shop, auto repair shop, and one day the owner came to me and said, "Look, Paul, can I grab your car for a second?" And so he wanted to, because it was a quiet day, he wanted to park my car in his garage to show that it was they were busy and they had things on, because he knew that customers would be driving past looking to see whether they were busy or not, and that would influence their future purchase.
Here are some examples of using social proof to help boost the success of your startup. Firstly, as you're getting established, try to get the logos or get customers with logos that are well known to the wider community. As you do this, the organizations down the track will see those well-known logos and use that as a cue to come on board themselves. I did this a few years ago when I was selling online training. I first targeted about 10 enterprises and government agencies that just had known brands and known logos in the industry. And I used that as I then pitched to new customers. This worked really well. It broke down barriers, and I used that social proof to help increase my sales. The next example is a story told to me by the founder of Jaybird Sport. Now, when Jaybird Sport was about 7 or 8 years old, the founder, his name is Judd Armstrong, he was approaching a university to get them to provide research to support the development of one of his new products. And during that process, some members of the university panel asked, "Why should we support your product? Why should we get behind you?" And Judd's response was, "Well, we know our product is good, and it's that good that it's being sold in the Apple stores." And that one comment that it's being sold in the Apple stores was enough to persuade all of them in that university to support the research on this product. And so never underestimate the power of brands to help provide social proof. Lastly, you can create great customer events with your startup. Now, you see great examples with Apple, where they create the WWDC developer conferences each year, and also the way they leverage crowds lining up outside their store to buy new products. But even as a tiny startup, you can still do great events and attract 50 to 100 potential customers and put on a great show. And as you take photos and as people see themselves in this group, you break down those barriers, and you're using social proof to influence this group to move forward and purchase your product. Okay, now we're up to the principle of liking. Now, this is quite straightforward. We will be more influential when we get people to like us. Now, there are two ways we can go about this. The first way is by highlighting similarities that we have between us and our potential customers. I'll share an example from a few months ago. I was at a perfume store and with my two-year-old toddler, and he did not want to be with me at that time. And as you expect, a sales assistant came up to me wanting to give me suggest samples for me to try and specials that are on at the time. And the pitch wasn't going well for me because my toddler was just wrestling me and trying to get away. He didn't want to be in a perfume store. He wanted to play, and I was getting frustrated. And I just almost felt like walking out the store and not doing anything about it. But the the salesperson did one thing that stopped me in my tracks, which resulted in a sale, and that is she highlighted a similarity. She said to me that she had a similar age child and she knew what it was like taking them shopping, and that one similarity created a connection with me and that salesperson. And even though I knew about the principle of liking, and it didn't stop me from wanting to purchase and make a transaction. So I ended up getting some perfume, and I was happy with it. But it wouldn't have occurred without that salesperson highlighting a similarity that we shared. The second example is to give compliments. Now, this is something you've got to be careful of because you can't be fake. You have to have a genuine interest in your customers and prospective customers. And giving compliments, one way you could do about that is by recognizing and really helping them feel good about the successes they've achieved. This needs to be genuine and from, I guess, a personal interest that you've got in that customer. The more you do that in that approach, the better you'll have of customers liking you. Here are some examples of how you can use liking for your startup. Now, the time will come where you'll be reaching out to people that you can't get introduced to, that you've never spoken to before, and you can't get introductions to. In those situations, I try to look at the person's number of common connections I have. And if I've got a high number, I like to highlight that in the opening sentence of my email. It might be, "Hi John, it looks like we have 20 common connections here in Brisbane. It's a small place, isn't it?" And then open into my message as to why I'm reaching out. It's one way to quickly build some common understanding. The next is to find ways to ask thoughtful questions in your meeting. So this means really doing your research on your customer and knowing where they've worked previously, what their interests are, what their concerns are, so that you can come up with ideas and some suggestions to stimulate that discussion. The other is around your marketing, so regionalizing your website and marketing. So, for example, if you have built a startup to sell to potato farmers in Idaho, then you should be showing pictures of potato farmers in Idaho using your product. And so that when those prospects are looking at your website, they'll see themselves and they'll like it and they'll connect with your message. And finally, when possible, there are ways you can use gamification in your applications to get people to do things for your website and do things for their account, and that can give you opportunities to compliment them. It could be about reminding them that their profile is 95% complete and that they're in the top 10% of completed profiles for your particular platform. So there's a few different ways there, but the key is to find a way to give them a compliment and compliment for what they do. The principle of authority means that we are influenced by those who are experts in their field. Having a good sense of trustworthiness is a good way to demonstrate authority. At the same time, when we recognize our limitations and then bridge across to our strengths, this can be a very effective tool to influence people. A great example of this are the speeches given by Queen Elizabeth I. In 1588, her troops were expecting an invasion from Spain, and in her speech she said, quote, "I know that I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart of a king, and a king of England too." Close quote. At that speech, she was able to rouse her troops and get them very passionate and supportive, and she used that to empower her authority. And then 13 years later, she gave a very similar speech, but this time to Parliament. She said, quote, "And though you have had and may have many wiser and mightier princes sitting on this seat, yet you have never had, nor shall have, any that will love you better. Close quote. So again, she was using these words to drive her sense of authority to her subjects to be of great influence. Some examples on using authority as a startup founder. One suggestion is to build your own public profile as a founder. You could do this through attending and speaking at public events and writing opinion pieces about what you're passionate about, but being identified as a founder. This can help you in a lot of ways to increase your influence. As mentioned in the definition of authority, being trustworthy is a really important thing. So be honest about your shortcomings as a founder. You might have made mistakes in the early days. Talk about what you've learned, but also share what you're passionate about and how you're trying to change the world. And the other idea is to build on others' authority. So you could do this by speaking with groups of other more influential, more public figures, such as panel events and doing interviews with people who have high profiles. So doing this adds to your authority and your public profile. Now I've left my favorite influence principle as the last one. I believe it's one of the most strongest ones, which is scarcity. Scarcity is our desire for something increases when it becomes less available. The other thing is that also the value increases as it becomes scarce. Here are some examples you can see. Gold, Monet paintings, and the last BA Concorde flight. Each one of those has a scarce element which drives up the value, but also drives up people's interest in obtaining them. I've provided two examples of how you can utilize scarcity. The first one is time limitation. That is, giving people a deadline to purchase your product within that period of time, and they will get some kind of benefit up front. That could be a price discount, or it could be something else where they get more features if they buy at a certain time. Or as early adopters, they can be part of your product roadmap and part of that early stage. Another option that I like to work with is on quantity limitation instead of time. So what you say to especially when you're at a very low number of customers, you say, we're giving a special offer to the first 20 customers. This product's normally $250 per month, but for the first 20 customers, you only need to pay $150 per month for the first 2 years. This limitation means that you can keep getting back to people, say, look, we're up to number 12 now, only 8 more customers to go before we lock that price out. And it really forces them to make a decision. And I love seeing that in action because you can get consideration and decision a lot faster. This final section talks about Cialdini's most recent book, Pre-Suasion. Its summary means that we are greatly impacted by the preparation we receive prior to receiving our message or invitation. Another way of looking at it is that the seed can be a message, and when we prepare the ground really well, that gives us the best chance of that seed germinating. If we don't prepare the ground well, no matter how good that seed or message is, it's not likely to germinate. In the book Pre-Suasion, Cialdini revealed a 7th principle of influence. This principle of influence is unity. Unity means the more we perceive people as a part of us, the more we can be influenced by them. I personally like to see this as a bit like tribes, and tribes can exist in a lot of different ways. It could be the tribe that I used to go to school with, the people from that school, or it could be my profession, or it could be the group that I might do training with or exercises with or go to the gym with. But you see yourself as part of that group, and as part of that group is able to exercise a lot of influence on you, more than if you weren't part of that group. Cialdini gives a couple of good examples. One is family ties, and those relationships we have that are close, we allow ourselves to be greatly influenced by those through those connections. And the last example is one from the Holocaust story, is when refugees fleeing from the atrocities happening in Germany were more likely to be rescued by people who had a broader sense of families and of society than simply their own family group. If people were very closed, had a closed-minded view of their family group, they were less likely than someone to support somebody than someone who had a much broader sense of the human family. I'm now going to share with you another great example from Pre-Suasion that I've really found personally amazing. So this is a case study of a website, a furniture bedding store, which was online. Now, the store had a landing page of two different images. So a group of people that would look at the site, they would either see a landing page showing clouds, or they would see a landing page showing coins in the background before they went through to the store and its catalog. Now, it was really interesting how this landing page and wallpaper affected people's purchase behavior once they entered the store. So, what do you think? So the research showed that the people who saw the landing page and wallpaper of coins found that they were more orientated towards purchasing discounts and price and value based offerings. That their purchases and behavior was influenced a lot by those coins. And conversely, the people who saw the clouds before they entered the store, their purchase behavior was more orientated towards luxury, comfort, high quality, and it was very distinct, the behaviors that exhibited by this A/B testing that occurred. It was fascinating. Now, this example is also equally amazing and should raise a few eyebrows. So we're on this topic of maths exams for boys and girls in high school. So the research shows that women will perform less well in exam tests when there's a male teacher present and they've been asked to select their gender before completing the exam. Now, everybody knows that there is a false assumption in society that boys are good at maths. It's not true, but when girls are asked to select their gender and they're in a male-dominated area, that bias affects them and their performance. So if you were to change that, you can actually were to have not selecting of their gender and have a female teacher present or just have classes separated, you would find that the results will be exactly the same between boys and girls. So even though this is an incorrect societal perception, and I think nearly everybody knows it's incorrect, it's not based on facts, still that perception is a persuasive influence to girls and influences them to not perform as well. So really interesting, I guess, those who have daughters in high school and school, but also understanding how even false perceptions, when we know they're not correct, can have a bearing on us. Here are some more Pre-Suasion examples. The running race. So you've got a picture of somebody winning a running race. It could be a marathon or a sprint. Having salespeople view these pictures in their office when they're making cold calls has a measurable impact on the success they have in sales. There's Cialdini in his book talks about a telesales case study where there was a significant increase in results and revenue brought in when they displayed people winning races. The next image we can be influenced by is The Thinker by Rodin. So we've all seen that image of the thinker. What it does is it causes people to reflect more deeply on our message. So it's a great little segue to have at the start of a presentation when you want people to stop and think. And again, sometimes you're wanting to get people focused on winning a race and being confident. Other times we want people to stop and be reflective. And showing people images, either around their work or in our presentation, that can have a big impact on how we are influenced. Here are a few additional thoughts. Let's talk a bit about trust. We let those we trust influence us. Just think about those you don't trust. We build a wall around them or around us. We don't want them to influence us, and when we don't trust somebody, we are very careful about what they say, and they're less likely to influence us. The other thing is that influence skills will not help us if we're not trustworthy. So when you're in sales, you've got to think about the long game. Think about all your interactions with customers. You have to act in their best interest. You have to act in a way that you care more about their success than your own success, at least at a business level. And if they feel that, and if you're genuinely wanting to help them, you'll build that trust with people. And these influence tools we've just talked about in this presentation will just give you a bit more edge and increase your success rates. I really believe that the greatest influence you can have on influence is really yourself. If you can learn to influence yourself in a positive way, to have positive experiences engaging with customers and cold calling and really being passionate about their success and the success of your startup along the way, it will change you. It will bring out the best in you. And as you do that, you'll be an amazing influence to those around you. Just a quick reminder of the reference list. Mostly this presentation is taken from Influence and Pre-Suasion, both written by Robert Cialdini. And I want to suggest just checking out his books, as well as the interviews he's done on YouTube with various presentations he's done. It's really good stuff, and you're only going to learn more, and it'll help you in the long run. And finally, good luck. I really want to encourage you to learn about yourself and how you get influenced, what influences you, and some of the principles that occur in your daily life that you might not have been aware of. As you try to influence yourself to be really positive and excited about sales and about engaging with customers and solving their problems, you'll have a fantastic time, and along the way, hopefully your startup will grow and succeed. So all the best.